Welcome back. You should have some idea of the material properties that transfer over to the Replicate previewer. In this video, we'll be going over some of the texture map types that carry over and how you can get the most out of them. So let's not waste any time and let's take a look.
Now we'll be starting off this tutorial with an untextured version of the turbocharger from the Cummins 855 Max file within your Replicate Exporters samples directory. And I've isolated it in its own file here. And also, again, since the purpose of this video is to show off the texture map types, we won't be going into any UV unwrapping techniques. But you should know that you can't take full advantage of the texture map types unless you've already unwrapped your geometry objects. Also, 3D Studio Max allows up to about 99 different UV sets. When exporting to Replicate, only UV channel 1 will be brought over. So on to the map types. We'll go ahead and open up the material editor here. Each individual texture map that you'll be creating can be saved in any number of formats. We'll go ahead and display the full supported list on screen here. And we'll generally use pings here at Disti and within this tutorial, mainly because they have lossless quality and an integrated alpha channel. One other restriction is that your final textures for output to the Replicate editor should be a power of 2 resolution. Now, to get the most of your materials, you'll probably want to take advantage of the Render to Texture dialog box. And I've hit 0 to open it up here. And it's just a good way of getting some of the detail from the modeling straight from Max. And we can export it to our image editing program. So the first setting we'll go into is the padding setting here. That is the number of pixels that your resulting texture will render beyond the UV shells within your UVW map. The next setting that we want to make sure is that we are using our existing map channel. You want to ensure that you're using that by specifying it here. And we'll go ahead and take a step back here and look over our map channel to ensure that we've got ideal mapping coordinates. Now, for baking out a texture map, you'll want all of your UVs flattened to avoid stretching, as well as separating your overlapping faces, and you can select those by going to Select and select Overlapping Faces. And we see that we've got the bolts here on the inside of the turbocharger. They've been selected, and since this is a repetitive detail, we'll probably be painting something more specific for that rather than using output from the texture bake. So those are okay to have overlaps with that, but ideally try to avoid that on your main objects, as the output from Max can have some artifacts. So back to the Render Texture dialog box. We'll go ahead and add a texture map to the output list here. We can choose several different map types. Maybe create a more complex render shader and render a diffuse or specular map. Perhaps you might want to use a custom lighting rig within Max and render out a lighting map. But for this demo, we'll go ahead and choose an ambient occlusion map, which should provide a decent head start on our diffuse map. Now you'll note it's got an MR next to its name, and that stands for the Mental Ray engine. So note you'll have to have that enabled from your render setup for this map type to be available. We'll go ahead and specify a size for our texture map here, 512. Note that it's power of 2. And we'll go ahead, we'll name it Turbo AO. Save it out. And we'll also increase the sample rate here to 128. This will increase the render time but make our output a little less grainy. Final thing I wanted to note is that in the baking material settings, you'll find the default behavior is to load this new output map into a new material, and it will be using a shell material. But if you'll remember, this shell material is not supported in Replicate, so we'll have to replace that. Otherwise, go ahead and click Output into Source to avoid that complication. Looks like we're ready, so I'll go ahead and hit Render here and continue. Alright, so we've got our render completed here. So we'll go ahead and load what we've got into the Diffuse Map Channel. Go to our material, click on Diffuse and load up a bitmap. And load up our AO that we just baked. And make sure that's applied to our object. I forgot to click Show Map in Viewport here. And close this out. We'll turn off wireframe and collapse the UV channel. So here's our AO. We've already got a good start on completing our diffuse map. So the second map that I wanted to go into was our specular map. So go ahead and open up the material editor again here. Now your specular map will be used to differentiate different materials within the same UV map set. Or it could break up some of the monotony with a single surface, make it a little less computer animated looking. Now it'll determine your surface shininess and highlight color. So for instance, when painting, let's say, a dirt map, I've gone ahead and taken the diffuse for the turbo a little bit further here, with maybe some dirt or grease here. The greasy or dirty areas here won't be as reflective as the white or won't be as shiny as the painted metal here. So our spec map should look something like this, where all the metal surfaces are sort of like a brighter color, and areas that are greasy won't be reflecting as much. So you can see that those areas correlate. And when we bring that over into let's go ahead and load that map real quick. Turbo Spec. And when we bring that over to Replicate, I've already exported an example here, Turbo Spec example. We'll go ahead and open that up, and we can see that the darker areas kind of break up the highlight, make it a little less flat shaded all the way around. And it gives it a little bit nicer texture like painted metal. So the other maps that we can use, we'll head back to Max here.